Your Royal Highness, Madam President, distinguished guests, and dear students, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be here. And it's great to meet you, Madam President.
Likewise. The honor is all mine. Great to see all of you in the greatest business school on earth.
Of course. And thank you so much for prioritizing your time to do this conversation about responsible leadership. But before we dive into the topic of today, how has your visit to Norway been so far?
Amazing. If you promise to keep up this weather, I might stay. I'm not sure the Crown Prince wants to escort me around every day, like so beautifully as the whole family has welcomed us. But really, Oslo is one of my favorite cities, and I really do feel that Norwegians and Icelanders are what you in Norway call broderfolk. And so I feel at home here. And the city is just unbelievably beautiful always, but in this weather, you know this is like happens every 20 years in Iceland or something like this. So like it's amazing to meet the royal family. They are such amazing people, all of you. And I didn't need anything else. But meeting them in this weather, nothing could go wrong.
That is great to hear. Oslo is showing herself from her best side.
It is.
So, Madam President, you have been described as the investor, business leader, and the change maker who became the President of Iceland. And as Bendik mentioned, you have an extensive, and I must say very impressive, business career with several executive positions both in Iceland and internationally. You also played a key role in shaping Reykjavik University's executive education. You were the first female CEO of the Icelandic Chamber of Commerce, and you co-founded Audur Capital.
Very well, good pronunciation.
A pioneering investment firm. So when and why did you decide to pursue a political career?
Oh, wow. I actually still don't think about me as a politician, so I'm just being very honest. I think I have tried to use my life, my work, and my career to try to make a difference. And I don't think you can call yourself a leader today unless you're trying to catalyze change or drive positive impact. And I have been frustrated enough with the state of the world or the outlook that the next generation faces that I've tried to come at it in many different ways. As a business leader, as a teacher, as an investor, as an entrepreneurial candidate for president, because I certainly didn't have a political background. And I think what I have concluded, I guess we're lucky when we come from a small country like Iceland. We kind of grow up with the idea that we all matter and that we all have to matter. And maybe each of us can choose like 5 or 10 different careers or hats to wear in life. I think it's a privilege. And I've come to learn through those varied experiences that actually having this range of experience is very helpful in today's world and in my current role, because there are no challenges that need to be solved that don't require an entrepreneurial mindset, that don't require an understanding of the functioning of the government or our international institutions, that don't require a dialogue with citizens and the ability to put yourself in their shoes. So yeah, I just recommend to all of you young people a range of different things for your life, because it does allow you to take a systematic view on the many wicked problems that we have to solve. And so I don't think the only way to do so is to have a deep career in one stakeholder or sector of society. I actually think having a range of experiences across different parts of society is very helpful.
That is very inspirational. And right at the core of today's topic, responsible leadership in a world full of challenges. I think that really emphasizes the complex role of leadership today. And to me, responsible leadership is really the cornerstone of driving a sustainable business. But what does responsible leadership mean to you personally?
I could talk about that for a long time, but I think I'll try to keep it simple for the purposes of us continuing to talk here and hopefully get some audience questions. To me, responsible leadership starts with a simple but quite important question. And the question is the world better or getting to be better because you're in it? Whether you're an individual or an organization or even a country or a region, is the world becoming better because you're in it? If the answer to that is no, you gotta pause, I think. And I don't think you can call yourself a manager, in my mind, and there's nothing wrong with managers. We need managers, and we teach a lot of management in business school. But if you want to consider yourself a leader, if you want to talk about leadership, I believe you need to be catalyzing positive impact to fall into that category. And then you need to be thinking about how, in small ways or big ways, it doesn't always have to be big ways, you are making the world just a little bit better because you're in it.
I think that is a great question to ask yourself every day. So what impact am I making?
And when have we ever needed to ask that question more than right now?
Absolutely agree. Can you share an example of when responsible leadership was crucial in your career?
Yeah, I can think of many, but I'm going to take one I think is still quite relevant for all of us. I was leading this global non-profit called the B Team before I ran for president. And it's a group of global leaders from business and government and civil society who believe business must be a force for good in the world. And I had been in my role for about 3-4 years when Russia invaded Ukraine. And very quickly, we jumped on the phone and asked, what do we do? What do you do when something like that happens on the world stage? What is the right action? And just to put it into a sort of a reality check, we, on our team of 30, we had the CEO of IKEA, the CEO of Harley Davidson, the CEO of Unilever, just to name a few large global companies. And each of them had tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 employees in Russia. And significant growth markets. The biggest growth market for Harley Davidson, as a matter of fact, the president of that country, a role model for the strong man who buys a Harley. So it was a really, really dynamic, interesting conversation that we had to have, and we had to have it fast, because we like to consider ourselves a catalyst, somebody who moves faster than the UN or faster than the big global collaborative institutions and organizations that exist. And the leaders are all over the world. And so we had to jump on a phone call several times in day one, several times in day two. And by day 3, we had aligned the team and all of our businesses pulled out of Russia. And it was really difficult. It was painful, and it was not an easy decision. The tensions were really high. Like, how do you do right by the employees? And the innocent people and citizens of Russia didn't necessarily choose this war. And so there's lots of perspectives. Like in most leadership decisions today, it's not simple. But to us, we went to sort of the 3 principles that I think are essential for sort of leadership practices. Is one, we went to our moral compass. We created, when I became their CEO, a very clear picture of what our purpose and principles were. And if we consulted that, there was no doubt that this was the right thing to do. We needed to use responsible and peaceful practices to put pressure against the territory and integrity that was invaded at that time. That was the first thing. The second thing I think is incredibly important. We needed to have a learner mindset. So we didn't make a decision before everybody consulted their employees, their leaders in Russia, their whole management teams, some advisors, etc. So really listen and learn, because you cannot just make a decision without being a learner today, and a lot of people changed their mind in that process. And last but not least, I sent all the leaders home to speak to their children, because I'm a huge believer in intergenerational dialogue and decision making, and that's something we tried to practice on the B team the whole time I was there, and hopefully they still do. But basically, I asked them to ask their own children, what should I do? I asked all those CEOs to sit in front of their own children and ask. And the answer was very, very clear. So I think those 3 practices of having a moral compass, of being a learner and a listener and sort of being willing to learn about what the challenges were, and maybe our leaders were able to compensate for some of the challenges that innocent employees faced and try to do it well, but still apply that collective pressure, and listening to the next generation. And nobody moves us more than our own children, I think. And so I've often, with the leaders of business and government alike, talked to them about what their children would ask them to do or advise them to do when in a dilemma. And I think that works. And what really made a difference, and that's why it's a responsible leadership and a catalytic, courageous decision, is that since we were able to do this in 3 days, afterwards came 100 more and then 100 more. So there always need to be these first movers. And the courageous first movers that understand that it's very, very easy to be silent. But it's very, very hard to be the ones who first move when something like that happens. But it is easier when you do it together. And our community of courage was strong enough together. I don't think Unilever or IKEA or Harley Davidson or any of our businesses would have done it by themselves. But at least this community of courage moved together. Now, the war goes on. So clearly that act did not solve the challenge that we have there. But I think Russia would have been in a much stronger position and Ukraine in a much weaker position if this pressure had not been applied. And to me, this is an example of a peaceful way to put a pressure on when people break international laws and territories.
Thank you. That is great perspective. And I think a lot of the values that you mentioned, following your moral compass, applying a learner's mindset. At Microsoft, we talk about growth mindset all the time. Listening to the next generation and being courageous together. That are really values that have defined us in the Nordics as countries.
I think so.
And that have served us well over many years and been a part of contributions to the high quality of life. But our societies in Nordics, we are also renowned for our commitment to providing equal opportunity to all citizens, regardless of gender, culture, or socio-economic background. But as we heard, we still have a way to go to close the gender gap. So how important is diversity, equity, and inclusion to you and your leadership?
Incredibly important, but we are in, and I think we need to do some straight talking on this issue here, because we're in this very interesting time where the word woman has been banned from government websites in the United States of America. I mean, along with a lot of other words. And Iceland has led the world in closing the gender gap for 15 years running and is now holding a world record in a number of women in high positions of leadership, in particular in government, I should say, or in the public sector. Because in the private sector, particularly the world of money, but also the running of private enterprises, we still have a long way to go. And in Iceland, the so-called gender paradise, violence against women is still a massive problem like everywhere else. So we have a long way to go. And I have been thinking a lot about both what has happened in America and the consequences of that, and what's happening in our own country, and what's happening in the Nordics. We see more violence than we have seen, and we see. So on one hand, I feel like I'm almost living in two separate realities right now. The gender paradise called Iceland, and the Nordics maybe, where the well-being of people and planet and sort of shared prosperity is still the way we play the game or run our region, our countries. And then in some kind of a dystopian novel by Margaret Atwood and George Orwell's 1984 or something on the other side, where everything I saw in Handmaid's Tale, I'm in Gilead, and a woman is no longer a word that is allowed. And I am trying to make sense of this world, as I'm sure you all are. I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of questions, and I actually think that's also a very important part of leadership today. Are you willing to ask questions and sit with the discomfort and the diversity of viewpoints that you need in order to kind of rumble with that question? And part of that diversity of viewpoint, I think, is generational, and part of it is gender, and part of it is, kind of lived experiences or socioeconomic factors, etc. And one of the things that we have failed at, in my opinion, and I will take full responsibility for this on my behalf, is that I think we have fought the gender revolution. We've fought the gender revolution, I want to emphasize, as women. And I don't think we can solve violence or war or actually fully close the gender gap until we see what's going on with boys and men. And I firmly believe that that's the next phase of closing the gender gap and creating a sustainable, balanced, inclusive world, to reach out to the many boys and men who seem to increasingly feel like there's not a place for them in the world, that they don't feel like they have purpose, that loneliness is growing, their addictions are growing, violence is growing, and they are more often than not the perpetrators. And of course, not all boys and men, but that portion is growing in all of our countries, and the red flags are all over the place. So I think we need to, and I talk to women and girls about this all the time, because we're not done empowering women and girls. And I will continue to push for that for the rest of my life, no doubt, because I'm absolutely certain leadership and everything will get better with greater gender balance. But I think gender balance is key. And I really believe that in the United States, we miss the signs of a lot of people who felt left behind, in particular boys and men. And I think they went out to vote for someone who would take us backwards rather than forward. And I think this is happening in our own countries. And I think it could happen at an alarming rate if we don't wake up to it. So one proposal I have put out there a little bit lately, a little accidentally, honestly, but I hope it's still going to happen, is that this year is 50 years since women in Iceland took the day off on October 24th in 1975, and they brought Iceland to a standstill. Kids didn't eat because back then men didn't cook. Hot dogs sold out in the store because that was the only thing they knew how to cook. Buses didn't run because women sold tickets to the buses. Banks didn't open because women were the tellers, and nurseries and schools didn't open either because women were the teachers, and so on and so forth. And it was an infamous day for us, and it really helped women and men, boys and girls understand that gender equality mattered. And 5 years later, we were the first to vote for a woman as president in 1980. A few years later, we had an all-female political party that started putting pressure on other political parties. So we built childcare infrastructure. We introduced paternity leave ahead of many others, many things that we know here in Norway and across the Nordics to be the right things to do. And we've built gender balance on the back of this. Well, this October 24th, 2025, I guess it is, 50 years later, I hope we can invite boys and men and really encourage boys and men to stand with us, that we can stand across both the gender spectrum and the generational spectrum for a more peaceful, non-violent world, really in more of a solidarity and silence and a different way, because I'm actually thank you, Professor, for your talk about how we need to unplug. I actually think we're all losing our mind in this attention economy, and it's currently being attention economy is being held by social media. 13 to 16-year-old get 223 notifications in their hand, in their phone a day. They spend 9 hours a day on the screen, 5 on social media. And anxiety, depression, loneliness, and everything is up. So we've never been more connected, but never been more disconnected. So I'm envisioning this moment of joy and solidarity in silence, standing together and trying to disrupt this crazy energy that I think we're all losing our humanity in. And I know you come from Microsoft. I've actually spoken to leaders at Microsoft a few times. So I'm not, I don't want to be just angry at tech. Tech and AI is going to enable a lot of good things for us. But let's make it a force for good and not a force for destroying our inner peace and ability to be humans. And I think that's what's happened to an entire generation. And the consequences are very dire. And in this world, the violence that our children are witnessing and experiencing is out of this world. And most of us, older, don't know. And I'm holding a lot of intergenerational dialogues where what the young people tell us, teachers and parents are flabbergasted. They cannot believe this is the reality that our children live in. So that's a sour note. So you're going to have to let the audience bring a happier note.
Yeah.
But can't you just see it? October 24th, we're just standing in silence and solidarity and joy. Weather is going to be as beautiful as Norway. Norway will take care of the weather, right?
Can I just say, before I leave the word to you and the audience, Bendik, I think that it is fantastic. And I couldn't agree more. And I think in the era of AI and technology, we have to be courageous together to make sure that we can use technology in a responsible and a secure way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.